Welcome, everyone, to the Georgetown University Webinar Conference, Interreligious Responses to Laudato Si, a 5th anniversary celebration and reaffirmation of Pope Francis's encyclical on care of our common home. Today, we have the final session. There were 2 yesterday. I hope you tuned in. They were wonderful. Today's is entitled Implementation of Laudato Si, a call for multi-religious collaboration. This session and the webinar conference are sponsored by the President's Office at Georgetown University, the Berkeley Center for Religion, Peace, and World Affairs, and the Office of Global Engagement at Georgetown University, and by the Yale Forum on Religion and Ecology. Hello, I'm Pete Mara. I'm the director of the Georgetown Environment Initiative and the Laudato Si Professor of Biology and the Environment, and I'll be moderating today's discussion. Let me say just something briefly about my new and exciting role here at Georgetown University. I've been here for just over a year, having spent 20 years at the Smithsonian Institution prior to that. But my entire purpose here is to build, support, and infuse the entire Georgetown community with environment and sustainability research, education, and action, but throughout that entire Georgetown University community, and that's a global community. But that effort in itself is sort of an act of implementation of Laudato Si, the exact reason we're here today. So I'd like to now turn to our exciting panelists, and they'll be speaking in the order of the introduction. But before we begin with Rabbi Ellen Bernstein, let me just tell all of you viewers how you can submit questions, because I'll be monitoring those questions. So please email your questions to berkleycenter@georgetown.edu. Let me spell Berkeley for you. It's BERKLEY Center, CENTER, @georgetown.edu. So we'll be monitoring those questions, but we'll go through each of the 4 speakers, and then we'll go through the questions and interaction, and hopefully turn it into just a wonderful conversation. So today, let me introduce first Rabbi Ellen Bernstein. She founded the first national Jewish environmental organization, Shamri Adama, Keepers of the Earth, in 1988. She's written numerous books on the intersection of Judaism, Bible, and ecology, most notably The Splendor of Creation and the Promise of the Land, a Passover Haggadah. Today, she continues to write, teach, and organize in the field of religion and ecology. You can visit her website at www.ellenbernstein.org. And the second speaker will be Dr. Iyad Abou-Mogli. He is founder and director of the Faith for Earth initiative. He has more than 35 years of experience with international organizations, the private sector, and scientific institutions. Dr. Abou-Mogli's expertise focuses on strategic planning, sustainable development, natural resource management, knowledge and innovation, and interfaith collaboration. Previously, Dr. Abou-Mogli held several leading positions, including as regional director and representative of UNEP in West Asia, director of knowledge and innovation at UNDP's regional office in Cairo, senior environmental advisor at UNDP's sub-regional resource facility in Beirut, global practice manager for UNDP's Energy and Environment Group in New York, and assistant resident representative of UNDP in Jordan. Dr. Abou-Mogli holds a doctorate degree in engineering from the University of Bath in the UK, and an outstanding graduate of the Virtual Development Academy at Johns University. Next is Father Josh Kurithiradam, Father Josh for friends. He's coordinator of the sector on ecology and creation at the Vatican Dicastery for promoting integral to human development. He's also chair of philosophy of science and director of the Institute of Social and Political Sciences at Salesian Pontifical University in Rome. Father Josh has a double passion. On the one hand, he tries to pass on to younger generations a sense of awe and wonder about the grandeur of the universe and the beauty of creation. He does it in various ways, ranging from his cosmology classes to the Laudato Si creation masses that he often celebrates outdoors. Father Josh's second passion is for the care of Earth, our common home. He shares with others a deep concern for the increasingly precarious state of our common planetary home, and tries to motivate people to act, inspired by a holy zeal to protect this house of God. Father Josh has been particularly associated with the study and diffusion of Laudato Si. Among his publications, Creation in Crisis, Science, Ethics, and Theology, The Philosophical Roots of the Ecological Crisis, and the 10 Green Commandments of Laudato Si. Last but certainly not least is the Dr. John Chrysophagous, Archdeacon of the Ecumenical Patriarch. He was born in Australia, studied theology in Athens, and completed his doctorate in Oxford. He taught theology in Sydney and Boston, and currently serves as the theological advisor to the Ecumenical Patriarch Bartholomew, the Green Patriarch. His latest book is Creation as Sacrament, Reflections on Ecology and Spirituality. So thank you again. Remember, everyone, to send your questions to the Berkeley Center at georgetown.edu. And let me now go ahead to Ellen Bernstein. She's coming to us from Western Massachusetts in the United States, in Holyoke. Ellen.
Thanks so much, Pete, and thanks to John Borelli and the Berkeley Center at Georgetown and the Yale Forum on Religion and Ecology for hosting this event. And I'm so delighted to be here with my co-panelists, old friends and new. I've always felt that it was the responsibility of religious institutions to offer hope, particularly in times that feel so deeply challenging and increasingly more desperate. Not Pollyannish hope, but hope grounded in the life force, hope that rises up out of the earth like a redbud tree in the springtime, or hope that is born on the wings of a great blue heron as it lifts off so gracefully in the air. I want to briefly discuss a few different ecologically grounded projects that have arisen in the Jewish community as models for consideration as we discuss the implementation of Laudato Si. All are rooted in hope, in the life force, in the God force. I want to note at the outset that all the projects I'm suggesting come from the margins of the Jewish world, not the establishment center. These projects don't necessarily identify themselves as religiously Jewish, but they arise out of a Jewish sensibility. And I think this is a point that we may want to reflect on in our discussion period. In my opinion, the most hopeful thing that has developed in the last 25 years in the Jewish community is the rise of Jewish farming. And let's define farming here as a more intensive form of gardening, since farming for some can conjure up agribusiness on the one hand, or something a bit too fringe on the other. I'm talking about small-scale farms, neighborhood farms, urban farms, schoolyard farms, church, synagogue, and mosque farms, community farms. The inclination towards living simply and working in partnership with neighbors and friends on the land on which you live to grow the food that you are going to eat seems to me to be one of the most promising responses to a world that has become increasingly divorced from the land, reliant on economies that extract from the land and pollute the land, yet never really adequately feed the people, either literally or spiritually. These locally Jewish-rooted farms do so much more than provide healthy food. They cultivate neighborhood bonds, build community, and they are a powerful defense against climate change. When farmed properly using simple traditional methods, the soil acts as a carbon sink, sucking carbon out of the atmosphere and binding it safely into the soil. While this movement still has not penetrated the established Jewish world, it is gaining in popularity among a certain segment of the Jewish population, especially Jews under 40. So I want to share with you a bit of the background of this movement. We have two successful farming programs, Adamah, which means land, and Urban Adamah, that began around 20 years ago when some young Jews wanted to actually live the Jewish ecological values that they were encountering through their exploration of Jewish texts. Adamah on the east coast of the US and Urban Adamah on the west bring together young people from all over the country and the world to participate in 3-month-long intensive programs of organic farming, animal husbandry, sustainable living, Jewish learning, contemplative practice, and leadership development. Many participants who may have found little in Judaism to keep them connected to their tradition experience for the first time how Jewish living can bring meaning and joy to their own lives. These types of programs are an antidote to a Judaism which is too often characterized as an indoor bookish tradition where those who are the most learned in texts receive all the honor. These programs level the playing field. Religiously oriented Jews have no advantage over secular ones. Everyone comes together in a new environment to learn new skills. The success of these programs is not necessarily about farming per se, but it's about engaging in a meaningful, pleasurable, challenging, and redemptive activity that is good for the soul and good for the soil and good for neighboring community and good for the world. The program's effectiveness is due in large part because environmental living and Jewish living go hand in hand. The deeper you delve into one, the deeper you find yourself in the other. Farming organically cultivates three fundamental Jewish values: awe, gratitude, and tzedek, or righteousness. Young alumni of this program end up assimilating the training into their lives and work in a variety of ways. Some go on to rabbinical school with the dream of integrating ecological living into every aspect of synagogue life, from the schools to the physical plant and the grounds, to worship services and holiday, to tikkun olam, or repair the world type activities. This is already a reality in a few synagogues, including the one I belong to, where the entire education of the school is integrated with the seasons of life on the farm, and all the holidays are celebrated outdoors among all the growing things. And many synagogue members volunteer on the farm, cultivating the soil, tending the plants, baking bread in the cob oven with wheat grown on the farm. On Shabbat, the Sabbath, everyone comes together and relishes picnicking outdoors. These outdoor religious programs have been wildly successful in attracting hundreds of unaffiliated families to the synagogue. That's because so many children and those adults who are still in touch with the child within naturally gravitate to the outdoors, where they feel a sense of freedom and aliveness, or perhaps godliness, that they do not associate with the indoors. I'm devoting much of my short presentation to the whole topic of community farming, since I believe it actually could serve as a model for other faiths and as a model for interfaith collaboration, especially if we could develop more of an infrastructure and find the financial and institutional backing so that these programs could grow and have a serious impact on religious life and on the earth. I want to shift gears and discuss a very different model of interfaith partnerships that also is grounded in an outwardly secular vision rooted in shared religious values. That is eco-peace, a novel collaborative approach to ecological security in the Middle East, initiated about 20 years ago with 3 executive directors, one from Israel, one from Palestine, and one from Jordan. While this program functions mostly in the Middle East, it could be replicated in other parts of the world. EcoPeace has many different programs, but the one I want to draw your attention to is the Jordan River Project. Father Josh and I had the privilege of participating in a glorious week-long interfaith trip along the Jordan River this past February, right before the pandemic set in. Let me begin by reminding you that the Middle East is the most water-stressed region in the world and suffers from water insecurity. People in this region do not have reliable access to enough safe water at an affordable price to lead healthy, dignified, and productive lives, nor are the ecosystems upon which all life in the region depend able to sustain themselves. Climate change is already contributing to even greater water stress in this region, causing sea levels to rise, extreme weather events, decreased precipitation, and ultimately less surface and groundwater available. The current water situation in the Middle East is inadequate to address each country's internal agricultural and domestic needs, and there are severe economic, political, and security implications. EcoPeace has developed a series of collaborative programs to address water insecurity. The underlying philosophy of EcoPeace is that the natural world doesn't abide by political borders. Migrating birds and animals don't perceive political borders. The Jordan River, the lifeblood of Israel, Palestine, and Jordan, doesn't recognize political borders. It's all one watershed. Whatever one community does to the river if it pollutes or takes more than its share of water, affects all the other communities in the watershed. Likewise, it's impossible for one community to rehabilitate the Jordan River by itself. EcoPeace's approach to restoring the Jordan River is modeled on the way that ecosystems function, interdependently. The goal is for each partner to fulfill its own self-interest while they all enjoy mutual gain. I haven't begun to sketch out all the good that EcoPeace is doing in the world, and in particular, its water energy nexus, an inspiring partnership in the works in which Israel will provide desalinized water from the Mediterranean to a water-starved Jordan, and Jordan will provide electricity from its vast solar arrays to an energy-hungry Israel. I recommend you to their website, ecopeaceme.org. But EcoPeace could do so much more if it had stronger infrastructure and the kind of financial security it needs to allow for expansion in the Middle East and throughout the world. Again, I bring it to your attention with the hopes that the interfaith community could partner with EcoPeace to expand its reach. I want to end on a lighter note with a discussion of another program also rooted in hope that provides an opportunity for interfaith engagement while educating people about the earth and its ecosystems. Many years ago, the organization I founded, Shomrei Adamah, Keepers of the Earth, developed an all-species parade for Earth Day for the city of Philadelphia. An all-species parade is just what it sounds like, a festive celebration of the Earth's species and ecosystems. To pull off a meaningful and memorable and educational parade that engages thousands of people and has a lasting impact requires a huge amount of logistics and organization. While the parade is not an outwardly religious event, we and many of the spiritually oriented participants understood our activity as an expression of biblical or spiritual values, the values of the goodness of all of creation, the supreme value of biodiversity. The All Species Parade requires a significant effort up front. We spent a year working with about 50 secular after-school programs all over the city to teach kids an appreciation for the earth and all its inhabitants. Each student chose a favorite species, learned everything they could about it, created costumes and props, wrote songs and designed floats, and made puppets, and came on Earth Day embodied as their species. Classes came as whole ecosystems. All materials were recyclable, all vehicles were powered by muscle. They came on bicycles, on rollerblades, on stilts. They came with baby carriages with wheelbarrows full of seedlings. The parade began at the Philadelphia Zoo and slowly wound its way through the zoo's diverse habitats where we stopped to commune with many of our sister species. We continued on through the streets of Philadelphia until we reached Fairmount Park. 1,000 kids and their school groups participated, and 30,000 people witnessed the All Species Parade. It was a deeply memorable event that opened the hearts and mind of participants and the onlookers to the creatures of the world. As religious leaders, we know the power of holidays to inculcate a spiritual message, and we know that holidays can serve as organizing tools to motivate and engage millions of people. If we want to reach our constituencies, if we actually want to engage our communities in a love for the earth, we need to generate hope, and we need to keep hope alive for the long term. And we can do that by developing programs that are grounded in love and joy and beauty. This is what will attract our communities to do what theologian Thomas Berry called the great work. And this is what will sustain them and us in a lifetime of great work. I believe that we have all we need in terms of intellectual resources, spiritual resources, and creative resources in order to mitigate the climate crisis. We need to take seriously the very effective programs that are already in place, and we need to institutionalize them and finance them and roll them out more broadly throughout the world. If there's one thing I've learned from the COVID crisis, it's that the financial and institutional resources do exist to address the existential risk before us. I pray that our discussion here today can help us to harness the resources we need now for the future of life on Earth. Thank you.
Ellen, that was nothing short of fantastic. That was really, really wonderful. Thank you so much. Folks listening, please send your questions to Berkley Center at georgetown.edu. Remember, spell Berkley, B-E-R-K-L-E-Y, center.edu. And we'll turn to questions after all four of our speakers, our guests today, present. So next is Dr. Iyad Abou-Mogli, and he's coming to us from Oman, Jordan. Iyad, please.
Well, good. Thank you, Pete, and good morning, good afternoon to everybody. Greetings of peace, and thanks to Georgetown University, Berkley Center, and certainly Yale Forum for Religion and Ecology. I would like to share with you a presentation that I've prepared for this. I will be, of course, summarizing and trying to focus on contributing to the implementation of Laudato Si from an international perspective. And of course, what I will be presenting is not only what the United Nations Environment Programme and specifically the Faith for Earth initiative are doing. As you know, Laudato Si was launched in May 2015, and certainly Father Josh will be more able than I would be in describing what Laudato Si is about and what it is trying to address. But certainly Laudato Si talks about the global challenges, be it environmental, be it economic or related to poverty, and lays the foundations for a movement that brings not only Catholics to me, but also the international community to move forward in addressing not only from a religious perspective, but internationally move forward to protecting our Mother Earth. In 2015 as well, and in September, during the General Assembly, 193 countries adopted the Sustainable Development Goals, and we all know about them, the 17 goals addressing issues from health to poverty, from issues related to the environment, above land, underwater, cooperation, peace, and what have you. And these are maybe similar issues to those addressed by Laudato Si. In 2016, specifically, UNEP organized a second of a series, a global conference in Tehran, an interfaith conference entitled Environment, Religion, and Culture in the context of 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. And that brought together faith leaders from different religions discussing Agenda 2030 and how should we approach them from a cultural and religious perspective. Building on that, in 2017, we saw that UNEP has been engaged on engaging faith and interfaith actors on environmental issues from early 70s and 80s, but that was on and off with no concerted effort. So in 2017, we found that there is a necessity to strategize and have a program that would drive our engagement with faith-based organizations. So we looked at the SDGs and the reports of the MDGs, the Millennium Development Goals, and what worked and what didn't work. What are the missing elements? Of course, the cultural perspective as the fourth element of sustainable development was really missing from the Millennium Development Goals. And we wanted to bring in an innovative approach to engaging stakeholders. And we know stakeholders, of course, are non-governmental organizations, the civil society, private sector. But the faith community was not really engaging on the Sustainable Development Goals in a concerted, unified, coherent manner. So from that, we came up with a strategy, and we called it the UNEP strategy for engaging with faith-based organizations. And our mission is to inspire, empower, and engage with faith-based organizations, specifically to deliver on the Sustainable Development Goals at all levels, be it local, regional, or global. And our vision is we want to arrive to a world where all creations, whether living or non-living things, live in balance. So we as in the message of Laudato Si, we want to establish harmony between humans and the creations. Now, what are the three main goals of the initiative? We looked at the inspirational component, the engagement component, and we wanted to empower and be inspired by faith leaders, whether high-level faith leaders from their wisdom and knowledge and tradition and so on, or local faith actors at any corner of the world. And we know that there is a mosque or a temple or a synagogue in each corner of the world. So there are leaders of change everywhere. The second objective, we looked at the economy of things, and we looked at the economy of faith-based organizations. And it is now very well known that faith-based organizations are the fourth largest power on earth in terms of investment. They own massive amounts of investments, whether in banks or investing in industries. So that needs to be aligned with the goals of the Sustainable Development Agenda and contribute to the Sustainable Development Action Agenda of Addis Ababa, which talks about financing sustainable development. And third objective is how do we bridge between science and theology or religious studies. So whatever also the UN, UNEP, and other UN organizations and international organizations come up with, they come up with scientific reports that are highly sophisticated, highly focused, and so on, but they talk to the like-minded or the educated. We wanted to translate that knowledge and that science or evidence base into a language that is acceptable and comprehensible and understandable by the layperson, and specifically by the faith leaders, where they can, when they preach about something and our commitment to God, to protecting Earth, they associate that with scientific evidence. And for all of that, we have prepared the entire machinery of UNEP, empowerment of staff to be engaging with the international interfaith community. In 2019, we were lucky to have the United Nations Environment Assembly. This is the highest international authority responsible for setting the policies on environmental governance at the global level. And it is held every 2 years. So in 2019, in March, we held the fourth UN Environment Assembly. And it was the first time in the history of the UN to hold the Faith for Earth dialogue, where we brought more than 200 faith leaders representing more than 15 faiths and congregations to specifically work with decision makers and engage in dialogue and discussions on policy matters. And we had the pleasure of having many people, including Father Josh, who during that conference discussed with us the organization of the second international conference on Laudato Si. And it was a happy moment that we agreed, and we held the second international conference in July of the same year with the participation of more than 360 young people coming from across the globe, discussing how young people can drive Laudato Si to be implemented in every continent by the young people, and how can we empower young people to be the agents of change. Building on that and in continuation of our efforts, we held in Kenya another meeting, which was attended by more than 12,000 followers Actually, they were all from the Christian religion, to talk about stewardship and contribution to Laudato Si. And that was a momentous event where people from all backgrounds, in terms of, rich people, parliamentarians, government representatives, and ordinary people came together to understand the relationship between religion and the environment. The same year as well, inspired by Laudato Si, I visited Morocco, and I've attended the ministerial conference of the Islamic nations. There were 58 ministers representing the Islamic countries, and we discussed with them the adoption of an interfaith religious strategy for engaging on environmental issues. And luckily, that strategy was adopted during that conference. And now we are working with the Islamic organization to come up with an Islamic Laudato Si, if you wish. Actually, we have just approved the name, and probably you will be the first to know its official title. It is Mizan in Arabic or in Quran, which means the balance, because God created everything in balance. In 2020, this year, among other things, we have just concluded on the 8th of October an international conference organized between UNEP and the Icelandic government on the spiritual role and moral responsibility, ethical responsibility, the value systems and standards in changing the behavior of the people towards protecting Earth. And at the conclusion of the conference, we adopted what we called our sacred commitment. And we had the privilege of Cardinal Turkson representing the Vatican, Patriarch Bartolomeo, and facilitated by Father John, contribution and addressed the conference. And we had 30 more faith leaders addressing the conference, and 460 participants discussing the ethical responsibility of humans, whether individuals, organizations, or groups, in protecting and in the environmental governance. And an additional objective was to launch what we call the Faith for Earth Coalition, that we are launching during the upcoming United Nations Environment Assembly. And we wanted to bring the diversity to represent the strength of the different religions. So we are building on the common understanding of the moral responsibility of religions. And that is a contribution in addition to what we're saying, that we need to work on scientific evidence, we need to work on innovation and technology to solve our environmental issues. But we are saying that alone does not work. We need to have an ethical revolution towards consumption patterns, which is the underlying cause for all of our environmental issues. So the Faith for Earth Coalition will be constituted of 4 councils. The first council is the Council of Eminent Leaders, bringing the wisdom of high-level faith leaders. The second one is the Council of Young People or Young Faith Leaders, where they bring the enthusiasm, the energy into action at the local level. The network of faith-based organizations, CEOs, we have on our board more than 42 faith-based organizations represented at the level of CEOs. And those manage millions of dollars in projects at the local level. So we want to coordinate and make that coherently contribute to sustainable development. And the fourth council or consortium is the Faith Science Consortium. And we have started by organizing a network of environmental and theology educators along those lines and bring them into the network. And of course, the purpose would be to mobilize the international interfaith voices at the global level. And we want to give them the space and the venue to discuss policy issues and bring the ethical values into decision making. The interlinkages between those councils have been discussed intensively, and we wanted to build the next generation of faith leaders after a long time, and we want the next pope to be the pope of ecology. We want to be the highest rabbi to be the rabbi of ecology, and so on and so forth. So we're working with religions, of course, not alone, to prepare this next generation to be the generation of interfaith ecology. And of course, each one of those councils would contribute in a different way. For example, the wisdom of the faith leaders engaging with the enthusiasm of the young people, and the science provided by the theologians and the scientists would provide very important elements into the work. The issue of the United Nations Environment Assembly that will be discussed is actually nature-based solution. And if you talk about nature-based solution, you are talking about traditional knowledge, the knowledge of religions of managing nature for centuries. So we want to bring that into the decision making. And we want to integrate a new economic model, but with examples, with models actually performed by faith organizations. And as I mentioned, they are the fourth largest power. And we just a couple of months ago heard about the 40 interfaith organizations or religions or religious institutions divestment commitment from oil and gas. So the movement has started, but it is not enough. We need it to be the norm, not the exception. Indeed, our work should be intergenerational. We want to facilitate dialogue between the different generations to prepare the next generation to lead the future. Gender perspectives should be integrated, and we have come up with a strategy on how to integrate gender on interfaith collaboration. Innovation is an issue that needs to be part of the priorities of our work. So we bring in interfaith or faith organizations who have come up with innovative work at the local level. For example, the Jewish Interfaith Conference Center based in Jerusalem, providing solar energy to Africa, or the World Evangelical Alliance working in Tanzania, and so on and so forth. So what have we done so far? We have the coalition concept approved. We have the institutional structure. We have come up with a resource mobilization strategy, a gender strategy. We have a 5-year work plan and a resource mobilization strategy, and so on. And hopefully we will be able to launch the coalition in next year during the UN Environment Assembly. I'll stop here, and I will be happy to answer any or all of your questions. Thank you.
Yeah, that was fantastic. It's a lot of impressive work being done there. We look forward to discussing that when we get to the questions. And don't forget, folks, please send your questions to berkeleycenter@georgetown.edu. And we will ask our esteemed panelists some questions after we have our last two speakers. Next up is Father Josh. He's coming to us from Rome in the Vatican. Father Josh, take it away.
Yeah. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and hope no one is keeping awake to listen to us. And as I speak to you from the Vatican, please allow me to bring you best wishes, prayers, and blessings from His Holiness for Francis. I cannot conceal the joy of being together with this panel because we are all very close friends. With Father John, we were at the last Parliament of Religions in Toronto. Ian, as he mentioned, very graciously hosted the last Laudato Si conference at the UNEP, at the United Nations Environment Program headquarters last year. And with Ellen, we had a beautiful, very touching interfaith ecumenical pilgrimage. So delighted to be together. And I would like to congratulate Dr. John Borrelli and all the organizers of this conference, and also for choosing a very relevant theme on implementing Laudato Si. I would like to share with you just 3 reflections. Why we need to think of implementing Laudato Si today, what can be done, to achieve that goal, and how can we do that? Laudato Si, as we know, was published in 2015, and it struck me, hardly a fortnight after the encyclical was published, Dale Jamieson of the New York State University wrote that this is the most important environmental text of the 21st century. Now, looking back, we think it was a prophecy. But after 5 years, we think it is important to raise the orbit of Laudato Si. We need to think how we can bring Laudato Si into action. And that is my first point. Why? Because Laudato Si, as we know, as Pope Francis himself writes in the encyclical, and he keeps on repeating, it is a response to the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor. He said it also on the 24th of May this year, on the 5th anniversary of the encyclical. And he reminded us that this cry is only getting louder and louder. What the scientific community is telling us, not just one crisis, just climate crisis, biodiversity, and we are reaching tipping points, points of no return. The Greenland has begun to melt. The Amazon is dying out. The Indian monsoon, the West African monsoon, the coral reefs, and scientific communities is literally worried that once we cross these threshold points, Earth will become uninhabitable. And what personally worried me was the cover of Nature last month, 24th of September, hardly just over a month ago. And the cover page, the article was about the Antarctic. And we thought the Antarctic is stable. And now the scientists are telling us that the West Antarctic ice sheet is becoming unstable. We know the Greenland alone can raise sea levels by 7 meters. And if the West Antarctic and all these tipping points. So the first point is the cry of the earth is getting louder. And again, the cry of the poor. This is a woman in Bangladesh, the poor who are paying the price. And the whole injustice at the core of this crisis. This is again of last month, Oxfam study on climate crisis. Now, who is causing it? The richest 10% contribute something like 52% of the cumulative emissions. And the richest 1%, contributing as much as 15% of global greenhouse gas emissions. The middle class 40% contribute something like 41%. And it's heart-wrenching. The poor, the other half, contributing hardly 7%. I invite you to reflect over, maybe contrast the richest 1% contributing 15%, and the poorest, the other half, not even half of that, just 7%. So we are living in a divided world. It's what Desmond Tutu called the climate apartheid. On the top of the slide, we have the map of the world in terms of emissions, and down the map of the world in terms of mortality due to the climate crisis. I mean, if I can just call your attention to, on the top, you don't see Africa, for example. Africa contributes so little. And down, Africa is so conspicuously present, So this is the why, the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor. And the pandemic has highlighted these two cries. We know it's a zoonotic disease. It has come from the destruction of ecosystems and wildlife trading. The planet is not healthy, and we cannot be healthy. And here again, who pays the price? This is again a very, very touching picture. In India, I come from India, and at 8 o'clock in the evening, the Prime Minister announced the lockdown. And he says the lockdown will begin at 12 o'clock. In 4 hours' time, the entire country shut down, and poor people, literally walking thousands of kilometers from New Delhi and Mumbai and back to their villages. And some of them also dying on the way, or suffering so much. So the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor. And to this, we cannot ignore the third cry, the cry of our children, so clearly telling us, don't mess with my future. So this is the why of the reason. We need to bring Laudato Si into action. We need what Pope Francis says, an ecological conversion that can lead to concrete and transformative action. See, the emphasis is on conversion, but not in something abstract, something that can lead to real transformative action. And so that's the reason that I'm going to the how of it. Pope Francis announced a special Laudato Si year. It has never happened in the history of any other encyclical. Should we wait for 40 years or 50 years or 100 years? Hardly after 5 years, Pope Francis said, we need a Laudato Si year. And so many things are happening in this year. If I can just pick up a couple of things, we have had the season of creation, and I'm sure John will agree with us. We have had the best ecumenical season of creation this year. And the theme was Jubilee for the Earth, also being the 50th anniversary of the Earth Day. We are creating Laudato Si gardens, and they are springing up all around the world. And the aim is, as faith communities, to contribute to the planting of 1 trillion trees, which can arrest climate crisis by a third. And also, when trees are grown, ecosystems get restored. Water comes by, birds come by, communities are reborn. But then what I really want to emphasize is another project that at the end of the Laudato Si year, Pope Francis is inviting us to launch a multi-year action platform to make communities around the world, as he had said right here at the beginning. Laudato Si is addressed to all people of goodwill. And the Laudato Si Gardens is also sponsored by the UNEP and the FAO and the UN and civil society, everyone together. And now what's the aim of the 7-year plans is to make communities around the world totally sustainable in the spirit of the integral ecology of Laudato Si. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change told us in 2018 that we have something like 12 years to turn things around. That's why children began to strike. So next decade is the only time, very narrow window of time that we have, very short. And so we need to begin this journey involved, and this is the what we need to do. We need to create a movement. It also came in Ellen's sharing, a movement of people. So we are proposing to begin a movement in 7 years. It's again very biblical, 7 years, beginning with families, communities, parishes, but also villages and cities, and also educational institutions, schools, universities, hospitals, healthcare centers, businesses, farms, organizations, NGOs, foundations, communications, and religious orders. So everyone coming together and beginning a 7-year journey. And again, sustainability, but in a much deeper sense, if I might say, because Laudato Si speaks of sustainability, but in a very holistic sense. So to the families, to the schools, to the universities, to those joining the 7-year journey, we'll ask them, keep this, and we have copied the UN, the SDGs, and we have created LSGs, Laudato Si goals, and sort of summarizing Laudato Si into 7 targets, 7 goals, that we respond to the cry of the earth, so energy, water, all the physical dimension, that we respond to the cry of the poor, that we put the poor at the center, indigenous communities and migrants. And then we work on ecological economics, that we need to change the paradigm. And in November, we are going to host the Economy of Francesco, 3,000 young economists coming together to think of a new economic paradigm, that we need to change our lifestyles. Then the 2 pillars of education, spirituality, and that all this we do in communitarian action. So these are the proposals, And how are we going to do it? We are inviting people, and I should confess, there's already a lot of enthusiasm around the world. So the idea is to begin at the end of the Laudato Si anniversary year, which will close in May 2021. We begin with the first group, and we really hope to have thousands of families, thousands of schools. A website will be created so people can sign in. But it doesn't end here. The idea is that we need to grow exponentially. So 2021, the first group would begin their journey. And 2022, we want another group to begin their journey. And hopefully, and not just hopefully, it has to be at least the double of the previous year. 2023, the double of that. 2024, the double of that. So we might, in a decade, literally manage to turn things around. Now, why did I say this? It is because sociologists tell us that for any transformative change, we need what they call the critical mass. Now, the good news is that the critical mass is not a very big number. They say that enough that 3.5% of a group come together, and we have the critical mass. That's how slavery was abolished. People came together. People thought it could be changed. That's how the Berlin Wall came down. That's what Mahatma Gandhi did. That's what Nelson Mandela did, and Martin Luther King, everyone. But allow me to say this. The sociologists tell us that one thing is to begin the transformation. But for systemic change, they say we need something like 21 to 25%. And that is challenging. And that's the reason we need to come together as churches, and we are doing it. We need to come together as faiths, as religious traditions, with civil society, everyone, we need to come together. Always recalling those words of Pope Francis in Laudato Si 160, what kind of world do we want to leave to children, to those who come after us? So delighted and congratulations to Georgetown University for sort of coordinating this movement, especially at the interfaith level. And as I was listening to Ellen, I was thinking, we need to look back because we do have spiritual, cultural resource in our own tradition. So look back, look around our own brothers and sisters, and also look around and hear the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor today, and look ahead. We need to give hope. And hope is so important, especially today in the context of the COVID. We need to provide a horizon of action where people can join in. And I want to conclude with this image of the Good Samaritan. In a way, it summarizes the new encyclical for Francis, Fratelli Tutti, that we are all brothers and sisters, that it is time to kneel gently on the ground, Adama, but also kneel before our wounded brother or sister and touch gently and heal his wounds, his or her wounds. And when we do that, I think we are being religious, and God is there. So this is my concluding message. Let's kneel, let's return to the earth. Let's return to our own brothers and sisters, especially the most vulnerable among us. Then we become a family. And when we do all that, God's grace, God's Spirit is with us. And I conclude once again, thanking Pope Francis and thanking all of us for the beautiful gift of Laudato Si. Thank you so very much for listening to me. Thank you.
Father Josh, thank you so much. I feel your empathy for the earth and for all people. That's really wonderful. That really meant a lot to me to hear that. Let's move to our next speaker and final speaker. Then we'll move to some questions. John Chrysophagus. He's coming to us from Maine, the state of Maine in the United States. John?
Yes, thank you. And thank you to the previous very inspiring speakers. First, allow me to thank the organizers for this integrated celebration of the 5th anniversary since the release of Pope Francis's Laudato Si, with a particular interreligious response and affirmation. I'm also very honored to join such distinguished colleagues on this panel of the conference that's co-sponsored by Georgetown University's Berkeley Center and Yale University's Forum on Religion and Ecology. And I'm going to stop on and emphasize the very interfaith dimension, both of this conference and of my aspiration for creation care. So let me open with an acknowledgement that an interfaith and ecumenical event such as this is surely neither coincidental nor accidental. What I want to underline in my brief presentation is the importance and sacredness of interfaith encounter and solidarity in themselves. It's one thing to talk about our ecumenical connections. It's quite another to pursue and promote this connection at every point in all that we do. It goes beyond learning what each of us does in our communities to what all of us can share in our concern and passion to care for God's creation, not just at the highest levels, but predominantly on the grassroots level. I've come to believe that in our relationship with creation, we're called to evoke and affirm our interconnectedness among ourselves, as well as with the rest of the world. It's what I call the ecumenical imperative of creation care, because this sense of interconnectedness reminds us, first of all, that the earth unites us all, before and beyond any doctrinal, religious, political, racial, or other differences. We may or may not share religious principles or ethnic backgrounds or political convictions, but we most definitely share an experience of the earth, the air that we breathe, the water that we drink, the ground that we tread, albeit not always equitably or justly, by some mysterious connection that we do not always understand and sometimes even resist. The earth itself reminds us of our interconnectedness. You see, people often think of ecology as leaves and bees, as flora and fauna, as sun and soil, but it's not just that. It's about the social nexus around them. With the presidential election just a few days away, I can't but speak of what's happening, at least in this country. When Donald Trump took office, he announced that the US would leave the Paris Agreement. One of the first things he said, on the one issue that demands worldwide a collective response to safeguard the earth for future generations, the US decided to walk away. That cannot be the way forward. It's not good for politics. It's not good policy. It's not good religion. It's not good for faith. And it's definitely not good for the planet. And I need to point out here, again, in light of these imminent elections in my country, that I'm not referring to Donald Trump as a party leader or as a scapegoat. I'm referring to Trump as a symbol of all that was already morally wrong before he took office, and will probably remain morally wrong after he leaves office. Donald Trump is not an aberration in the system. He's a reflection of the system. People think that if somehow someone else is elected, everything will magically change. Everything will go back to normal. But Trump is not unique or exceptional. He is as American as apple pie. Trump is the inevitable culmination of a society that combines instant celebrity and cheap capitalism, consumerism and corruption, the embodiment of what invariably goes wrong when society promotes the rich and pulverizes the poor, when profit is the only standard. And that impacts everyone. It impacts everything to the last speck of dust on this earth. That brings me to another timely point that people have mentioned, though tangentially so far, the parallels between the ecological crisis and the current pandemic. Because whether we're speaking of climate change or COVID-19, we're dealing with an unprecedented crisis. And crisis, the Greek word krisis, implies judgment. We will be judged by our response to the critical phenomena that shape our lives, that jeopardize our lives. And how we respond is exactly where the faith communities come in. It's why the faith communities are called to work closely together. In some ways, the greatest threat to our planet at this time is actually not the novel coronavirus, for which a vaccine will at some point, God willing, and thankfully be discovered. It's climate change, the way Father Josh pointed to that slide. The growing but largely unrecognized death toll from rising global temperatures will actually eclipse the number of deaths from all the infectious diseases combined if planet heating emissions are not constrained. And of course, the greatest devastation will emerge in poorer, hotter parts of the world, though the economic loss from the climate crisis will be felt all around the world. The World Economic Forum has called for a great reset of capitalism in the wake of the pandemic, arguing that sustainability will only be achieved through drastic lifestyle changes. Iyad pointed that out. And a team of international scientists recently concluded that in order to address climate change in light of COVID-19, we can't rely on technology and science alone. We have to change, I quote, our affluent lifestyles and reduce overconsumption in combination with structural change. But are we ready for such conversion? Are we ready for such transformation? That's where the role of religion, and more critically, the importance of an inter-religious response emerges. My son recently told me that COVID-19 provides us with a fascinating social experiment. He said, "Dad, throughout the pandemic, scientists and at least some civil and religious authorities asked us to do the slightest, most trivial, most negligible thing for the sake of others, for the protection of the world, just wear a mask." And still the answer was no. Still the answer was politicized. Still the answer was my right for my freedom. What are the chances that people will respond to having less, or hoarding less, or wasting less, or sharing more? Economy and politics decide who will survive, who will have clean water, who will have health care, but economy and politics will often do so at the expense of the poor and minorities. Climate change and COVID-19 are wake-up calls, and we often hear it stated that COVID-19 is the great equalizer, the great stabilizer. But in so many ways, it really isn't. COVID-19 is merely what has exposed structural inequality, institutional corruption, and systemic racism. The world will change through climate change. The world will change as a result of the pandemic. The question is what direction it will take. Will the global economy be more exclusive and divisive, or will it become more inclusive, more sustainable? These are precisely the questions that faith communities must ask, and that they are called and compelled to address together. Let me, because I mentioned to the organizers, I had PowerPoint envy when I saw my colleagues' slides. So I'm going to show a few slides and tell me if this works. But some pictures for you for my third and final point, which is really where I'm going with my own presentation about the importance of friendships, about the importance of relationships. So in my concluding part to this reflection, I want to talk about the particular regard and respect that distinguishes the relationship, the very close friendship between Pope Francis and the Patriarch Bartholomew, the spiritual leader of the Orthodox Church, a friendship that's inspired communities throughout the world, a friendship that was reinforced once again only a few days ago in Rome. From prior to his election in 1991, I've been privileged to work very closely with the Ecumenical Patriarch. And during this time, I've witnessed not only the endless hours that he's devoted to creation care, but also my own evolution resulting from his vision. And I am grateful for the journey, as well as for the many opportunities that it has afforded. Among these, I would definitely, particularly highlight the honor of attending the formal launching of Laudato Si on the morning of June 18, 2015, in the new Synod Hall of the Pope Paul VI building in the Vatican. What many people do not realize is that the encyclical was jointly released, on the one hand by Peter Cardinal Turkson of the Pontifical Council for Justice and Peace, whom we know and respect so much, subsequently the first and current prefect of the Dicastery for the Promotion of Integral Human Development, and on the other hand, by Metropolitan John of Pergamon, senior bishop and spokesman of the Ecumenical Patriarchate. This was entirely unprecedented in the history of papal encyclicals. Moreover, while it was not entirely surprising for Pope Francis to single out and highlight the exceptional example and eminent initiative of the Green Patriarch, Bartholomew, it was also the first time that a formal papal encyclical referred at all, let alone so prominently and extensively, to an Orthodox prelate. So this too was groundbreaking. In fact, in the very opening pages of the document, after referring to historical encyclicals published by his immediate predecessors, the Pope penned 3 substantial paragraphs under the subheading entitled United by the Same Concern. That's crucial. The New York Times recorded just a couple of days after, Francis tapped a wide variety of sources in his encyclical, partly to underscore the universality of his message. He cited passages from his 2 papal predecessors, John Paul II and Benedict XVI, and he drew prominently from a religious ally, Patriarch Bartholomew of Constantinople. In fact, the communications between the Patriarchate and the Vatican throughout the lengthy drafting process of the anticipated encyclical demonstrated yet another aspect of ecumenical conversation and dialogue in the search for common ground and mutual action. This vital relationship, this ecumenical dialogue between a pope and a patriarch in the modern world is, I think, a less familiar but crucial aspect of the papal encyclical. 1 year before the appearance of Laudato Si, the 2 prelates had traveled together to Jerusalem on May 24th in 2014 to commemorate the 50th anniversary of the historic visit there in 1964 by their visionary predecessors, Pope Paul VI and Patriarch Athenagoras, the 2 that toiled for ecumenical relations between the 2 sister churches after more than 500 years of complete estrangement and silence. And later that same year, November 29th, 2014, Pope Francis formally visited the Ecumenical Patriarchate in Istanbul, much like his predecessors had done, Pope John Paul II, Pope Benedict. And 1 year prior to this, on March 19th, 2013, Ecumenical Patriarch Bartholomew decided to attend the inaugural Mass of Pope Francis in St. Peter's Square. His spontaneous gesture, a fairly small gesture really, signaled nevertheless the first time that any leader from either church had ever participated in such an event. So what I would submit by way of providing a more personal, more ecumenical background for Laudato Si is that the papal encyclical was long anticipated not only from an ecological perspective, but also in the context of inter-Christian openness and exchange between 2 contemporary religious leaders sincerely and steadfastly committed to restoring communion between their churches. I believe that it's hardly fortuitous. In fact, it's quite providential that these 2 bishops are leading their respective communions at this critical moment. That's why they've also jointly issued various statements in Jerusalem in June 2014, in Istanbul in this slide in November 2014, drawing attention to the plight of people, in this case, Christians in the Middle East, but also an exceptional statement in September 2017, where they highlighted the importance of healing our wounded creation and especially our neighbor, as Father Josh's presentation concluded. So the power of ecumenism, the power of ecumenical encounter and exchange lies in beginning to open up beyond ourselves, beyond our own, beyond our confessions, beyond our communities. It's learning to speak the language of care, the language of compassion. It's giving priority to solidarity and service. And in this respect, creation care does have a vital ecumenical dimension because it brings us, divided Christians, insulated believers, before a common task that we must inevitably face together for the sake of future generations. As Ecumenical Patriarch Bartholomew stated in his encyclical for September 1st this year, it's clear that the integrity of the natural environment is the shared responsibility of all inhabitants of the earth. Humanity is clearly no more prone to rapid conversion than geological fault lines or tectonic plates are to sudden shifts. So it's probably difficult to judge the influence of the historical friendship between the Pope and the Patriarch in secular and religious circles alike. Whatever the case, there is no doubt in my mind that the favorable reception of, and perhaps at the same time, the adverse reaction to their shared advancement, their mutual advocacy of creation care is arguably the greatest testimony that these two leaders are in fact, well, on the right track. For this reason alone, their authority and example deserve our urgent attention and our diligent emulation.
John, that was fantastic. And I have to say, as someone who's been concerned about the environment since they're 6 years old, which I have, I'm really glad you all are on the same team as I am, because you've all presented some really powerful arguments as to why this really matters for humanity, because it really, really does. And I'd like to start the questioning by continuing with that theme of interfaith collaboration, and just pose a question, and whoever would like to take it first, that'd be great. And let's turn this into a conversation. But I'll have several themes that I sort of want to touch upon, and I'll take some questions from the audience as well. And don't forget, folks, if you have questions out there, send your questions to Berkeley Center at georgetown.edu. I do have a few questions that I will get to shortly. But I want to touch upon, I'm very interested in scaling up. How do we scale these things up to a level that really ultimately matter? And I want to first start really thinking about this from an interfaith collaboration perspective, and think about what the real challenges actually are from an interfaith perspective. And so, and how can we overcome them? So what are the challenges, number one? How can we overcome these challenges for effective mobilization of cooperative efforts that we've all just talked about, that we all have to do, whether you're religious or not, frankly? And how do we spread these issues out to our communities to promote this ecological conversion, which I want to add really starts with the individual. And I really feel that strongly, that it really does start with the individual level. So I really loved Ellen's example of these farming communities, because it ultimately is about that wellness. But I do want to start at the higher level first, but bring it back to that individual level, if you like. What are the challenges, and what do we need to overcome, and how do we do that for really effective mobilization and scaling up to the level where we really need to do to make a difference? So whoever would like to take that question first, please do.
I'll start. Oh,
great. Thanks, Ellen.
So I'll just address a couple of things. So one, I just want to talk about the difficulties in the Jewish community to begin with, like just thinking about how community is organized. And I imagine that this may be true in other faiths to a degree, but in the Jewish community, less and less people are going to synagogue. And so the whole notion of a synagogue, it can be an organizing center, but I think we need to also think beyond organizing centers as just like a church or a synagogue or a mosque, because I feel like that people may be hesitant about going into different religious institutions. And to me, that's partially why, that's another reason that these community spaces, like these kind of third places that are outside of religious institutions, may be an important and kind of a safe place to begin. So that's one thing. I also want to say that I loved what Father John said about his son, who mentioned that we're not even able to, all wear masks. Like we know one incredibly simple thing we can do to slow down the coronavirus, but we're not doing that. And for me, I feel like it's the way we communicate the environmental message is pretty much as important as the message itself. And I feel like many people react when you tell them what to do, or you give them a strong moral message that you need to do this. And so that's why a lot of the projects that I'm talking about are all based in joy and building something together, as opposed, so it's sort of a yes statement. Yes, let's do this. Let's build this together, as opposed to you need to, do X, Y, Z in order to be a good person. So I'm sure other people have things to say. So I'll, for now, stop there.
Feel free to jump in.
Well, if I may, Pete, and thank you for mentioning it. And scaling up is the buzzword. Actually, it is the key for moving us forward. We do see innovations here and there. We do see electric cars moving on the streets. We do see solar systems being used to generate electricity. But scaling up is the solution. I mean, why not all cars are electric cars or solar cars? Why not, people in remote areas have access to sustainable energy and so on? So this is exactly what the United Nations is trying to do. Specifically from my own perspective as Faith for Earth initiative, I come at it from 3 points. First of all is institutionalizing what we do. And this is exactly why we're doing it with the United Nations Environment Assembly. This is why we bring in the faith leaders to the table with the decision makers, so they adopt global resolutions that can be applied by member states. And we have 193 states members of in our assembly. So making that, or bridging the gap, or the vacuum between policymakers and religious leaders, is part of scaling up. The second one is education and awareness, and you cannot scale up without educate people what is needed to be scaled up, what works and what doesn't work. And I would mention here that during the international conference that I mentioned that we concluded on 8th of October, we launched one unique and extraordinary book called Faith for Earth, A Call for Action. It talks about how different religions are approaching ecology. It talks about Laudato Si and how it is a message to the international community. It talks about examples of how this has been working for centuries and why it cannot work now. And it provides inspiration for the people to act. And this book was launched by the Parliament of World Religions, the Yale Forum on Religion and Ecology, and UNEP supporting the work. Now, the third point is what I keep saying, and I hope I do not have people not happy with it. We need to practice what we preach, right? We keep going and telling people, you need to do this, and we don't do it ourselves. We have mosques, churches, synagogues, temples that consume a lot of energy, that produces waste, that doesn't use solar energy, that doesn't have green spaces, and so on and so forth. So you cannot have a preacher inside those houses of worship without being, a model. When you talk about something, you need to be a model in doing that. And I'm glad that a couple of months ago, UNEP has published guidelines for greenhouses of worship. And we brought thousands of examples from around the world, from all religions, to say, well, it's happening. Why don't we adopt it across the board? Any mosque that is built or to be built, any church that exists or to exist, they need to adopt these guidelines. So we do practice what we preach. And for example, the 50% of the schools at the global level are owned by faith-based organizations. So we immediately, if we practice what we preach, we can make 50% of the schools at the international level green, and so on and so forth. Thank you.
Thank you, Iyad. Father Josh or John?
Yeah. We seem to be following the same order, so I will chip in.
Sure.
Just three things. First of all, looking at the challenges and being realistic. I think we need to acknowledge that the challenge is huge. It's not just climate; it's biodiversity, water, it's social inequality. So we need to accept with a certain realism the complexity of the challenge. And if I can go deeper, the problem is the paradigm behind. It is the economic paradigm, the cultural paradigm. And so we really need a paradigm change. So the huge challenges and how to really to transform, we need a paradigm. So that's the reason I think also to congratulate universities, like Georgetown or Yale or, So the response is to work at various levels. First of all, we need to work with economists, politicians, faith leaders, young people, indigenous communities, villages. That is the mirror image. The challenge is multifaceted, but the response also can be multifaceted. And there it's important to strategize. We cannot afford to improvise. We need strategies to network people, to network disciplines, and to change the paradigm. That's the second thing. The third thing is the science of hope, and I can literally vouch for it. Also working at the Vatican Dicastery for, we are the sector of ecology. We see things. There is, I think it's Prophet Isaiah, chapter 39. New things are being born, and we see. And what really surprises me is coming from the peripheries. I think of young people in the Philippines. I think of indigenous communities in the Amazon or in Indonesia or India, and so, and I think we also need to accept that from the bottom up, peripheries, things are, think of Greta Thunberg. One girl made so much of difference, and there are thousands of Gretas around the world. So, and I think of a diocese in the Philippines where all the parishes have become solar. They use solar energy. In the developed world, when we have to, ban plastic, the argument is the who will pay the cost to go to the consumers. And poor countries, Rwanda banned plastic nearly a decade ago. So, but my point is that things are changing, and there is this bottom-up approach, but we need to strategize, network. And the last sign of hope, what John mentioned, we have the right leaders. We have Patriarch Bartholomew, Pope Francis, I'm sure many others. Ellen, who was one of the first people to begin, Iyad, who was taken face to the heart of the UN, and thousands of leaders. I just picked up, Pope Francis and Patriarch, because I think I again go back to my roots, like people like Gandhi and others, because every age, when there's a huge challenges, God also sends us the right people. Could be a Moses, could be a Prophet Muhammad, or could be Jesus, or but then and so that's, and I want to conclude on that. I mean, it is God's work, and it's Psalm 23 that says, "Earth is the Lord's, and Lord will renew the earth," but we need to collaborate. And so challenges need to strategize, network, but also lots of science of hope. Thank you.
John, would you like to comment?
No, I mean, I agree with all that's been said. I want to sort of remind ourselves, or challenge maybe ourselves, or balance, counterbalance the notion of scaling things up with the importance of also scaling things down. I think it's still a challenge, and we need to work hard to try and make connections, interfaith connections on the community level. We do interesting things. Roman Catholic communities do, Muslim communities do, Jewish communities do, Orthodox communities do, but reaching out beyond ourselves, beyond our comfort zone, is really crucial here. And I think that creation care lends itself to that kind of opening up. So it's so important, I think, to not just organize events, but literally knock on the door of the community next door, whether Christian or Muslim or Jewish, to bring people together, to share the difficulties, to share the experiences, to share the data, the information, the education that Iyad spoke about, to help one another, to empower, to encourage one another, to dare steps in a particular direction. And that takes hard work on the local level, but I'd like to see more of that. I know it's something we push for in the ecumenical department of the Greek Orthodox Archdiocese constantly. And you know, it's not easy, but it's another facet of this multifaceted response that Father Josh is talking about. And again, creation care lends itself to this. We all share the earth. We all care for the earth.
Thank you for that. I want to ask a question that a listener out in the community has sent in. This is Joseph Prabhu, a professor of philosophy from California State University, Los Angeles. At a time when universities in the US and around the world are being driven by business and technocratic models, what strategies and methods might be most effective in promoting the values and vision of Laudato Si and an ecological civilization? Any takers?
I could say something briefly, again, following on my previous point about reaching out to other organizations or groups or communities. If universities can have a combined, a concerted, a collaborative approach, it can be pretty powerful when you have not just individual universities, but groups, coalitions, alliances of universities working together. That would be one sort of level of a response. And another would be bringing in the response to environmental issues, not just on particular sort of faculties or departments of a university. It's, you know, it's easy to have, you know, a particular center or a forum that, you know, deals with religion and ecology. Bringing these issues into every department, every faculty, every school within a university as a core concern, I think can be a much more powerful transformation of that academic community.
That's interesting. Yeah, I truly believe that as well. Anyone else? Ellen?
Yeah, I just want to really agree with Father John. I think that universities could be incredibly important in terms of gathering places because they are neutral. So it's it's like a safe space to bring together different religions. It's bringing together the sacred, the secular, and people coming from a religious perspective. And to me, that's another part of this puzzle that we haven't really talked about, but that there's such a division between the academic world and the religious world. And that's a huge, division that needs to be overcome, just as the same division between us and all of nature. I feel like it all comes from the same place, and we need to be working on that. But I think Well, first of all, I just want to say I was so thrilled that Georgetown was doing this project, because this doesn't happen very often. And there's just a few universities in the United States that actually have programs like this. But I think we need you. You know, I think that religious institutions absolutely need universities as much as we need each other, as much as we need to be working in an interfaith way. We need to be working academia and religion together. And just as someone who works in academia part-time, it's just so clear to me how much ambivalence there is from academia towards religion, and I'm sure both the other way. So I just feel like it's a critical need.
Yeah.
If I
Totally
may,
agree.
Peter, I mean, I agree with everything that was said, and we do need to bridge the gap between sciences and theology and bring more to the table. And this is exactly one of our objectives for the Faith for Earth Coalition that I have talked about, and the creation of the consortium between scientists and theologians. And well, I would disagree that probably Georgetown is unique in this. There are so many other universities doing the same. But this is the problem. And also an opportunity for doing better. Because I have been working, and the idea behind doing a consortium is I have been receiving so many requests for collaboration on knowledge sharing, on education, and so on from different universities at the global level. I am working with University of Connecticut, for example, Ohio, Yale, Illinois, and so on. That is from North America, but also from other parts of the world. And each one of those would want to do something, and we need them to do something. But if we do have a platform that coordinates and make these contributions coherent to complement and add value and probably add innovation and maximize our efforts, rather than, you know, to keep talking about Christianity and ecology, Islam and ecology, and keep doing it once time and again. We need more. What does it mean from a water perspective, climate change, biodiversity, rule of rural communities or agricultural people, and so on. So we need to have this sort of database that brings, you know, uniqueness to every effort that contributes to the overall efforts by everybody. So we do need this platform or network that brings us all together to move forward and maximize our contributions.
Yeah. Father Josh?
Yeah, if I'm, it is a great question, and maybe I would begin with a critical observation. You know, when we saw children coming onto the streets, you know, to call the world's attention to climate crisis, and some of us thought, where are the universities? Where are and we thought of 1968, when the Cultural Revolution was, you know, led by young university students. And this time, and I wouldn't put the blame on the students. Probably it's all of us. You know, all of us work in the university. So it's our faculty. Are we inspiring our students, and also the students? What are the issues? You know, so that's the first critical, you know, thing I think we need to mea culpa, and so we need to probably work on that. A second thing is, I think it's also the educational paradigm, because from the time from kindergarten up to the universities, we think you are the center of the world, and there's so much of Cartesian ego, like, you know, at the center. And we need to change that paradigm. Our best business, you know, the deforestation is done by mining companies, by the CEOs, or they're the best engineers, or, you know, and they have come from our business schools. You know, they're not from indigenous communities, or, you know. So I think it's, and I'm trying to be critical on this, on universities. So we need to really rework, overhaul our educational curricula. And as it was mentioned, you know, and Georgetown is, I know of an engineering faculty in Hungary, where they have overhauled the entire engineering program in the light of Laudato Si. Imagine, like, you know, I'm sure there are many other examples. So that is the part. And the third thing is you had said, create this consortium. And In the Laudato Si 7-year plans, we have also put university, schools. And then the path is this, that you work on your curricula, but also use renewable energy. And then we have thousands and thousands of the universities, and universities do play a very critical role. So thank you.
Thank you. John, did you want to add something?
Oh, I agree with all that's been said. Very early on, Ellen mentioned that young people don't attend synagogues as much, and the same can be said for, I think, all religious communities. And we know that religions are great mobilizers, but academia has a special sort of responsibility here, a special role. They have a captive audience. I mean, they have thousands and thousands of students who are ready to sponge everything. And if it's not the right lesson, as Father Josh mentioned, then the responsibility is very grave. But you have a captive audience that can literally transform the world after they leave their university campuses. So I would like to see much more happening, yes.
It's interesting. I obviously agree 100% with all of what you just said about the role of universities and higher education broadly around the globe. But I'm gonna just touch upon a different. We don't have a lot of time, unfortunately, but I think we could talk all day long. We have a really lively conversation here. I want to talk about intergenerational justice just a bit. It's something I feel really strongly about. And Emerson, Ralph Waldo Emerson, I'll never forget this quote. It's one of my favorite quotes, that we don't inherit the earth from our ancestors, we borrow it from future generations. I firmly believe that. And I firmly also believe, when I look at schools, younger schools, so changing the age direction, but sticking with education. When I look at the educational programming that's available for K through 5 or K through 12 younger kids, we're moving further and further away from teaching them around the importance of the environment. There's very little education available in curriculum around environment and ecology and our connection to nature. Maybe this isn't true in many places. I think it's true in most places, actually, that I've looked at, and I've looked at this. And I'm wondering, to what degree can churches fill a much bigger role here by developing curriculum around nature and about our connection to the environment and nature, because it's not happening in structured school systems, in public school systems. So I think this is really important. That is the impressionable period for people, for kids, to understand our connection to nature, and they value it. And this will allow them to sort of have that connection later on in life when they make those important choices.
Pete, if I might jump in, just two things. One is, as you rightly mentioned, there's a lot of scope for catechesis, faith education, and so we need to rethink our catechesis. And we have, children, especially when we prepare them for sacraments, baptism or confirmation or Eucharist, and I'm sure that Father John can speak much more, on the sacrament. It's a great, very promising area there, So, and also liturgical celebrations, because I think unless we love the earth, we don't celebrate it, and unless we celebrate it, we won't take care of it. So, educating them to love the earth, then celebrating it. And from last 2 or 3 years, every Sunday we have a Laudato Si Mass in the open air, and every Mass is unique, because when we pray and creation is always praying, we're just joining creation. So we need to be creative and find those strategies. And second thing you began with intergenerational solidarity, and I see an element of hope there. From my own personal experience, but I learned it from a friend in Chicago, Michael Cherian. Sometimes when we speak to a parish audience, especially in the US, it's very polarized, or elsewhere, they say, not all scientists, the usual defense, But the moment you say, think of the kids you love, your grandchildren, and I used it myself. I've seen it working. When scientists tell us by the end of the century we have 3.6 degrees centigrade. And what a world we are going to, and you tell people, invite them, think of your grandchildren, your children, and all of us are either parents or grandparents or aunties or uncles, we priests. We have kids whom we love, and that really touches a very powerful nerve. I saw it also happening at one of the meetings where we had with oil companies. And I cannot say names, but one CEO told us, the other day, my 13-year-old daughter told me, Dad, you're very smart, making lots of money, but you are destroying our future. And he said he couldn't sleep that night. So maybe now children are leading it, but we also need mothers for the earth, parents for the earth, professors, universities, academicians for the earth. But let's allow children to lead us and that's a very, very promising area to work with, in. Thank you.
Yeah, if I may add, I mean, this is exactly what we need. We need education that touches the hearts of our young people in the way they are now accustomed to. You wouldn't find now a boy or a girl, probably, I mean, because of the online schooling, my grandkids, they are 3 years old and they are online all time, every day for hours. Of course, studying, but also playing. So these are the tools that they have, and we need to be innovative in getting to them those messages in what they are now using. I give you 2 examples that I have been engaged with. A couple of months ago, a great priest in South India, the Church of South India, Dr. Thomas, has launched a book. I think the title is The Green God of the Bible.
Yeah.
And it is some 300 and something pages of animations talking about how Christ was an environmentalist, how the Bible is an ecology book, and how, giving messages with illustrations and so on. And this is exactly what we want, but it is an initiative. And as you mentioned, Peter, we need to scale up. We need all churches to produce such a thing, all mosques and so on. The other initiative that I am engaged is actually with University of Connecticut. And we are launching what we call HOPE, which is the Holy Observance for Planet Earth. And the purpose of that is to come up with educational materials for people from the different Abrahamic religions to start with. And we are using actually EcoPeace as a good starting point in the Middle East, in Palestine, Jordan, and Israel, and to produce such simple and easy to use and read material. So there are initiatives, but I go back to your point, Peter, we need to scale up. Thank you.
So I just want to say, I actually have a different perspective. In my opinion, in my experience in the Jewish world, education for kids is what we're really doing right. We have a very solid program called Teva, which means nature, and kids in 6th grade go on a retreat for a week. It's modeled after Nature's Classroom, which is a secular program, and they learn Jewish values by being in nature for a whole week. And these are kids that go to Jewish day schools. And this has been going on for 20 years. And I feel like the Jewish children who go to these, who are involved in these schools have an amazing education. And so for me, it's kind of, I feel the opposite sort of, and I'm a little worried that we're pawning all of our problems off on the next generation, on these kids. And for me, it's again, reaching in the universities and the adults. I feel like it's absolutely critical for us all to be doing good by the kids, being leaders as adults for children. So anyway, but we do really, I think in the Jewish world, the kid education is what we are most sophisticated at, just in terms of ecological programs.
So very briefly, just to add another perspective, and I agree with all that's been said, going back to Father Josh's point about politicians or education or business giving this short-term view of life and the world based on the ego. I think this is exactly where religion fits in, because religion has this longer vision, longer term sort of perspective on the world that should inform, should impact the present and our behavior. And it is exactly about the image that we have of the world or of ourselves, because the way we view the world is exactly the way we'll treat it, and vice versa. There's no point for religions praying for a place in heaven when our children won't have a place on earth. So it is incumbent on us to be preaching this all the time, to be teaching this all the time from the pulpits. And I'm not sure we're doing that enough. It should color every single thing that we do.
Well, thank you very much to all our guests here today. This was an honor to talk to you and learn from you. We should probably take this on a road show and around the world. I'm going to turn it over to John Borelli now to wrap us up. Thank you.
Yes, and thank you very much, Peter, for moderating this panel. This has been terrific. This is thank you for bringing out the best in these four wonderful participants. This panel has been everything we hoped it would be as we planned this conference. I bring you the good wishes of Dr. DeGioia, the president of Georgetown University, who's hosting this conference and has sponsored it. And in response to a request from the Holy See, not your office, Father Josh, but the Interreligious Dialogue Office asked us to put together a conference on interreligious responses to Laudato Si. And we very much wanted to put on this final session about implementation of Laudato Si. And we have heard some terrific ideas from your perspectives, a great international perspective. Dr. Abu Mogli from Amman and from Rome. Father John, you're in Maine, but you travel quite a bit, as you indicate, as your PowerPoints indicate. Rabbi Bernstein, thank you all. The exchange, we could go on and on. I see we have a number of questions from viewers, some repeat viewers from yesterday's two panels, and we're sorry we really didn't get to you. And thank you to all of the viewers for signing in and watching. We'll be posting these sessions once the conference is finished, and we can do that. We'll have it posted and information on how you can view these again and use these slides and videos. So I just want to thank you all for your cooperation and for the ideas that you have brought us to this day. Let's really hope, as you all, that we can really, step this up, that we can really move this up and increase it exponentially, the responses. I was quite struck by how so many religious communities have monastic traditions or traditions that combine labor and prayer. And the labor often involved farming. And even those gardens, farming the garden, as Rabbi Bernstein was saying, it gets you personally have your hands in the soil. That's your part of your conversion, the personal experience. And of course, we've got to talk about big farming and everything else, agribusiness. But this connection in our lives of doing something individually as well as joining cooperative with the various networks and doing something on a grand scale. So thank you all. And thank you to our viewers. We had quite a number of you who signed in and are viewing. So thank you for joining us. And we wish you all well with what you are doing. May God truly bless your work as you continue. Thank you.